welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast, the eighth episode. We've got Will back for this week. Unfortunately, we don't have Alex this time. I was really not looking forward to hearing his horror ranking anyway, because he does not know what a horror movie is. But yeah, we're here today. This is our Halloween special in celebration of the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist, and we're now fully into spooky season. I'm sure we've all been watching horror movies, and we're going to be looking at one of the greatest horror movies, I think, in my opinion. William Friedkin's masterpiece, The Exorcist. And after that, we'll also be doing a top 10 ranking of our horror films afterwards, so it's really properly into Halloween for this week. So yeah, the Exorcist, it follows if you've not seen it, it follows a little girl, Regan, who's recently been possessed by the demon Pazuzu, and her mother is attempting to find the solution to her illness with no success really, and we follow our local priest, Father Caris, and he's really struggling with his faith as well, and looking into his dying mother, and eventually their paths intercept together, leading towards this big event at the end. Of course, the very famous, I think everybody knows about it, the exorcism. And Friedkin's really aimed to set up a scenario that could feel like it was really possible in this world, and it's about a fairly normal family and a house. It's a really great setting for a horror film. Many horror films, like up to now, had been an escape from reality. Like they weren't realistic really. A world filled with monsters. Whereas The Exorcist really aimed to hit home, even if you aren't religious or anything, or believe in the supernatural. Like it's still quite a relatable scenario, I think. Yeah, it very clearly worked because The Exorcist exploded into theatres in 1973, being one of the most talked about movies ever made. It's really got that reputation of being the scariest movie ever made, I think. I'm sure most people will have seen it, but at least if you at least know the main story beats. Before I even seen it, I think I knew most of what would happen anyway, because like it's deep status and like pop culture and everything. But yeah, if I definitely encourage you to go see at least the re-release if it's still showing for you. But do not go and see the Exorcist Believer. It's very much a soulless studio attempt at continuing what this film was so successful at creating, and it's easily one of the worst examples of the recent remake sequels that most studios have been trying to make the last couple of years. But yeah, well, Friedkins himself said that he didn't want to be around for when this came out. When he seen that David Gordon Green was making it, and so at least he didn't have to sit for it like the rest of us. Um, yeah, but yeah, Friedkins really like to say that The Exorcist wasn't a horror film. Like it's obviously not true. It's very much a horror film, even though I'm sure Alex would probably disagree with that somehow. But yeah, it's very much true for the first half. It's very much drama focused, and that's really what came from Friedkins, because he was deep into the documentary style from his early on in his career. Like he won a lot of awards for that. So he came from that background, and it's one of the main reasons that the writer of The Exorcist, William Bly, approached him, because he felt like the film needed to kind of have that documentary style and really adapt this real life case, and it works so well because of that handheld tracking shots and faraway shots of Caris that really does make the film feel like a documentary. But yeah, I'm a huge horror fan, so I love it, but I did underestimate it for quite a bit, but I think it is one of the best films, or best horror films at this point now. But yeah, what do you think about it? You go ahead, Oscar.
Yeah, so I didn't rewatch this film for this, but it was I've seen it. Can't remember when I saw it, but it was fairly recently. But for me, absolutely one of the best horrors out there for sure. And I think it's just the sheer influence that this film has, and maybe not for the best considering it started a craze of Exorcist films that just has been sucked dry completely, and
Yeah,
it's really bad to see. But I think what makes this film so special is just the impact it had at the time, and just seeing a film like this in 1973 must have been the craziest thing ever. But yeah, obviously, rest in peace to William Friedkin. The direction in this is so strong, and he's such a fantastic director. And without him, I don't know what this film would be, honestly. But yeah, it's an incredible film. Definitely some, like I said, I think this film it would be a lot scarier at the time than it is considered now. Because I remember going into this, I put this film off for ages, hearing it was like, oh, this is the scariest film ever. Oh, this had been banned in such and such and such and such. But I think that's more of a time period thing. But yeah, the scariness does still partially hold up for me. But yeah, it's just an incredible film overall. Well,
Yeah, and I think what Oscar's saying is totally right. Like, The Exorcist does hold up, and people do hold it in this high regard because it's been able to transcend 50 odd years. But there's a reason for that. And when it first came out, it was revolutionary, right? It was kind of the first horror movie that wasn't really a horror movie that people had ever seen. Like, the first hour and 20 minutes, first half of this entire film is a drama, really. It's kind of like an introspective approach to two characters, and uh, it kind of goes through the story. It kind of goes through that story building process similarly to like a family drama. Like, we go through Father Karras and what's her name, Chris McNeil, the mom. We kind of see these two very different people with two very different perspectives on things, and we kind of see how they react to these horrific events. So in a way, like, the film doesn't really center around the horror in a way that a traditional like horror or slasher movie might. But it's a really nice balance of like drama, thriller, and moments of jump scare horror. But yeah, I think The Exorcist absolutely stands the test of time. And like, I watched this for the first time when I was like 15 years old because my dad, similarly to what Oscar was saying, was like, "This is the scariest movie of all time. You have to watch this." I was terrified as a kid, decided never to revisit it for like years and years and years. And then just this last year, I've watched it twice, kind of settling in for what type of a movie it is and growing a greater appreciation to what type of a movie it is and how different of a horror movie it is, and just how uh, great of a film it truly is. But I think we'll go break through down. I think we'll go break down some scenes, maybe talk about some of our favorite moments. But I'll pass it off back to Ryan if you wanted to get us going.
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about something you mentioned about it being a drama. Like the first half really does have that quite a focus on Father Karras, like really setting up the fact that he's struggling with both his personal and professional life, like causing him to really question his faith, and that really culminates in the death of his mother, like right before he finally meets Regan and towards the second half of the film, and it really sets up what the Exorcist is or what the Exorcist is about. Like it's very much a film about the mystery of faith rather than going out to be just a scary horror film. And it's not a religious, not really a religious film. Like it's not trying to push an agenda or change your beliefs or anything. Like it's or like other religious films at the time. Like Friedkin's really intended it to just be like you would go in and it wouldn't change your mind if you were you would come out taking out what you brought in. Like if you believed that the world was dark and evil when you came in to watch a film, like it would reinforce that, and you'd come out thinking that. But however, if you're someone that believes that there's like a force of good that triumphs and combats evil, when you would come out thinking that still at the end of the film. So it wouldn't be pushing any agenda or anything like some people would maybe think. But it was a really strong discussion, like making the film as well, like how they would drive your beliefs. Very much a point discussion between Friedkins and the writer Bly, which who also wrote the book, and then he adapted it to the movie. He was also the director of Exorcist 3. This is another film that people should check out if you've not seen that. But yeah, Friedkins really believed that the approach of not handling or hand holding the viewers and allowing them to come to their own conclusions, whereas Blatty wanted to have like more scenes that made their points more obvious, and that's really why there is like a director's cut and a theatrical cut available. Like these points are much more like emphasized in the director's cut, where like when they're in the hallway, in between the actual exorcism, they start talking about their faith and what it all means. Whereas in the theatrical, I think they just come out for a breather and it cuts back. And I was talking to Will about the ending as well. In the normal version, it just kind of cuts after the priest is looking over the stairs, and it's quite a bleak ending compared to the director's cut. There's like a 2 minute conversation with the police officer and the priest, and it's kind of just to show that life has went back to normal and like just like good will continue. It is a much more happy ending, I think. And but I do agree with Friedkin's sentiment in general, but these scenes added in the director's cut, they are great, but and I very much agree, or I very much prefer the ending to the bleak ending of the original. Um, Scenes, obviously, scenes I talked about outside the exorcism, I think those are great scenes. And the actual exorcism, I think, is probably the best scene in the film. I think everybody would agree with that. That's really when the final third of the film really begins, and it's just a really big contrast to the rest of the film, as it really plays much more into that supernatural side and plays into the horror elements away from that more documentary side that Friedkin's brought to the first half. And this is really where Father Merrin arrives, that iconic shot in the poster, where it results in one of the most iconic shots in cinema, I think. The dark atmosphere, like fog, and the shining light coming from Regan's bedroom. It's just a ridiculously beautiful shot. He was played by Max von Sydow. I don't know if that's how you say it, but he's in a lot of Bergman's films. That's where I know him from. But he does such a good job as Father Merrin. I didn't even realise it was him because of how good the makeup on him is. Like, it really aged him to be about like 70, 80, and he just looks nothing like him. It's an insane transformation. And I think there's so many great transformations in this movie. Like, Regan's makeup, it's insane. That's really what made this film, really. And it's one of the best child performances I think I've ever seen. The film really wouldn't be the same without her. Yeah. So, what did you think was the best scenes in the film?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. That exorcism scene will kind of stand to be the best for, I feel like, everyone. It's just like the most intense, most impactful, maybe. But there were a ton of really good scenes in here, kind of sprinkled throughout. There's a lot of really good shots in here, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about is the filmmaking in this. And The Exorcist really is experimental in a sense, because I'm not a big horror junkie. Anyone who knows me, I'm not like a massive horror fan. But I like to dabble among the greats, so I'll watch a horror from here to there. But I think what most horrors kind of do wrong is they get the pacing all jacked up. Like it'll be fast, slow, fast, slow, slow, fast, 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 slow, and it's really kind of hard to follow all this like chaos and speed up and down. But I think The Exorcist is paced really well. It's paced really slowly, very subtly, and it builds and lingers. And I think that overwhelming feeling and theme of loneliness is exactly what that type of filmmaking exudes. Like when we first meet our characters, the camera's kind of just like wandering around and then pinpointing them amongst people in the background. I think that's when we meet Father Karras. He's walking through like a university campus of some sort, and it's like this really long depth of field, and the camera just kind of ponders around and eventually lands on him. And then we kind of get like this sequence of him just walking, and we just follow him as we try to follow. We just follow him as he's going to his destination. And I think that just like the filmmaking decisions to add that type of scene in there is really smart, and it's really eerie, and it's really different, and it's an approach that I definitely appreciate, and it's different from the other horror movies that I've seen. Additionally, I kind of wanted to talk about the use of like planes, foreground, middle ground, and background. I think The Exorcist does such a great job of averting your attention from the different planes on the screen. There's a lot of conversations where stuff's going on in the background, where stuff going on in the foreground is just as important, or where characters are traveling from the background to the foreground to deliver a line or a piece of dialogue. I think there's just a lot of enriching movement within the planes from scene to scene. Quite frankly, every single scene, there's a really good attention to the distance and detail of the frame and the mise-en-scene in general. And it doesn't really go for that big thrill, which is another kind of horror convention it subverts. Obviously, there's that exorcism theme or that exorcism scene that we talked about, but it's not really like a campy, jump scary horror film. The fear of the film really lies in the fact that this is real, and this multi-millionaire successful mom is her daughter is being haunted by this devil demon that she can do nothing about, right? Like, she's the wealthy, affluent, she has all the resources, all the people, she has everything she could ever need, but the reality is there's nothing she can do about this, and this thing is just eating away at her daughter. So it's visceral, it feels real, and it feels scary in that sense. So that's really why I appreciate The Exorcist as a horror movie, because it's kind of unconventional in that sense. But Oscar, why do you love The Exorcist?
Yeah, I think it's kind of going back to that time period of being in 1973. I think this film is so big because it challenges like ideology between religion and science so much, and that was just a massive, massive thing for the time. There was a lot of religious backlash for this film. Religious zealots actually sent death threats to Linda Blair, the actress of Regan, because they thought this film was like hailing Satan and upholding those beliefs. And Warner Brothers actually had to um, send bodyguards for her up to 6 months after the release of the film, which just goes to show kind of like Will said, the reality of this film at this time. Like there was nothing like it before this, and that's what's so powerful about it. And that's what's so brilliant just about early horror in general, just the influence and impact on had just won't happen now, which is I guess a shame, but that's what happens when you get there first. And it stood the test of time perfectly. Um, I thought you don't get the reputation of being called the scariest film of all time by a load of people for no reason. For the most part, for me, it doesn't live up to that fully, but um, the reality kind of gets drained a bit when you see kind of the shots of that white faced demon. But for me, those are by far the scariest scenes in the film because it just happens randomly, and I think the face is really, really creepy. The face was actually meant to be the face of Regan. That was what it was originally planned for after she had kind of was slowly getting kind of eaten alive by the demon, I guess. But they scrapped that and just used it for that. But I think it's even better. It just adds kind of this sense of atmosphere and like mise en scène, like Will was talking about, to the film. But best scene for me, well, not necessarily best scene, but the scene, obviously the most iconic scene where he's walking up to the house and you've got some of the most perfect lighting you've ever seen, and it's just one of the most iconic shots ever. It's just unbeatable. But yeah, back to Ryan.
Yeah, like Oscar was saying, like this really did just like really set like a whole change in notion about what it means to be a horror film. And around that time, it came right before that big boom of all the 70s classics that we all know, and it's obviously one of the biggest events in cinema and a huge landmark in horror history. But like, it went on to be one of the most infamous movies of all time, getting 10 Oscar nominations, winning 2 for sound in the screenplay, making huge strides for the genre, being the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture, which to this day is still something that it struggles to get, and it doesn't get the appreciation most of the time that it often deserves. Constantly, like we've said, over the 50 years, been branded the scariest movie of all time. Like since it came out, there's obviously been a lot of inflated rumors with everything. Like it was the 70s, so there wasn't any way to really prove any rumors or anything, and all the hysteria around the film. But there's lots of people that have claimed to be fainted or sick, especially at the premiere. Even like the cast and Friedkin said that there was a lot of that happening at it. Surprisingly, it wasn't even the exorcism scenes that caused most of it. It was actually the medical scenes when she's getting Regan tested, which I do get is a very realistic interpretation of that, which definitely wouldn't have been seen at the time and would have been very different. In fairness, it looks really real, especially with the blood coming out of Regan's neck. Like that scene looks really real. And the old school X-rays are they would be really scary to be under. That's really creepy, all the machinery in those scenes.
Yeah, that's the scariest. That's the scariest scene by far for me. Easily, like my stomach starts turning, and when blood starts shooting out of her neck. Oh my god!
This is sound design. It's so good.
Yeah,
it really did deserve the Oscar win for that. Yeah, there was even a possibility, like when the studio seen it, that they weren't going to release the film at one point because how brutal it was. They thought, and of course, it did end up getting a lot of backlash, even being banned in the UK. But I think a lot of movies were banned in the UK at that time. There wasn't really a lot of leniency. But yeah, with The Exorcist, people do like to say that it doesn't hold up being that scariest film of all time, but it was just such a big deal at the time. Like at the time, there wasn't really anything comparable coming out in the early 70s. Like I said, that it really just coming out before that big boom in horror, with many classics in the years afterwards. And the decades prior, there really wasn't a lot of horror elements, but people had become used to, like we are today, with the genre mainly focusing on stuff like monsters, vampires, werewolves, and more psychological horror. In the early 70s, there was a lot more kind of typical slashers like we seen later on, mainly coming out of Europe, like Italian horror like Argento's films, but in mainstream horror there really wasn't really anything that we've seen today. Psycho was really the only slasher before at this point. And even that, some people don't like to call it a horror film. They call it a thriller still. So there isn't really anything that compares to The Exorcist before the year 73. But yeah, it's easily one of the most influential horror films ever made, creating its own subgenre, like we said. And there's been so many attempts at recreating it, and there's nothing that's came close to it really. Um, yeah, like to talk about Friedkin as a director now. Do you have anything to add about that?
No, but I was just gonna talk about The Exorcist and why some of the sequels maybe don't work as so well as the
Mm.
original. And I think like the heart of The Exorcist is like self-contained. It's really in one room. Like Regan doesn't really leave this room after she gets tied down, essentially. Um, and I think just that aspect of this contained demon and just like watching it unfold, but there's nothing we can do about it is just so terrifying. And I think with the sequels and stuff, like she breaks out of the room and she does like demonic shit that's, you know, world bending. And I think that kind of just gets away from the heart of the real creepy stuff, which is she's just kind of been devoured by this demon and it's eating her alive essentially. And just some of those really iconic shots of her pinned into that bed in that room. Obviously, the shaky bed scene, little kind of maybe more funny than horror inducing, but still a very cool scene. And I think there's just a lot of those moments where they're pretty intimate but scary and pretty layered. Like there's a lot of people thinking about their different, you know, morality behind what's going on. Like obviously, Karras is kind of had this religious conflict going on, like especially with his mother. His belief is kind of called into question, and he's has to do this exorcism, but he all of a sudden isn't so enamored with the idea of Christianity. So I don't know. It's a pretty crazy one, but I just think it really does well at a lot of things, and it like everyone else has said, it's kind of paved the way as a subgenre. But yeah, you can go on and talk about William Friedkin as a director. I know he's got a lot of films, a lot of accolades. He's
Mm.
a very Im- impressive voice in cinema, especially horror films. But you
Yeah,
can take it away.
definitely. This is maybe one of the best directed films I've ever seen. Maybe not just horror films. I'm not a big fan of him in general. I don't find kind of his films kind of boring most of the time, but which I did think about this in fairness at first, and it's changed. So maybe I would change my mind if on rewatching these others. But yeah, coming off his Best Picture win in the with the French Connection, that was kind of one of the reasons he got picked to choose or picked to direct this. By the William Blatty, who wrote the novel. He only wanted him to direct the film after seeing the French Connection, and that's because he was kind of known for that directorial style of being kind of more having gritty realism in his films rather than big flashy Hollywood movies. And the first half may be slow by today's standards because of that. There's a lot of sense of like tension still, which is really helped by the sound design, which is so great throughout the film. I usually agree that this style can be quite boring, but I like I said, I don't really love the French Connection or the Sorcerer, which he also done, which are also high Lakeland films. But yeah, it works really well here. Is reading about the after reading about the real life case, he didn't really want to make like another horror film. Like it needed to have more of that documentary style to really capture the realism and grittiness of the events. Of course, that only really lasts for the first half of the film, and then there's like kind of the insane horror things that you would expect towards the end. But the first half is so essential, like you were saying, for establishing that The Exorcist is a film about faith. And the stuff about Friedkin's really is what makes the film. It's kind of like what we were talking about with Jurassic Park. That kind of really had all the heart. It wasn't just dinosaurs, and that's again what the sequels get wrong. Um, it's not really a movie I think that really should have been made into a franchise. The second one is a very bad attempt at making an extra sequel. The third one is actually there's a sequel to the book made by William Blatty, who also produced the first film. So that film's also very good. But it's also quite different. It's kind of like a crime film that turns into. It still links to The Exorcist kind of. It's got the same characters. It's got Father Karras and the lieutenant that you see at the end of the film. One of the director's cut is at the end of the film, and it ties into that. But it continues on like 15 years later. So I think it is quite a good sequel for that. But then the other two, made by Paul Schrader, that is some of the messiest sequel stuff you've ever seen. Like, he pretty much made the film, then they just completely scrapped it and then re-released it when that done bad. And then David Gordon Green's is just, we don't want to talk about that. It's a horrible film.
I'm glad I haven't seen a single Exorcist sequel.
Yeah, if there's
Well,
one thing
I kind of want to watch 3 because of what Ryan's been saying, but I've seen more Exorcist films, the ones that have been coming out recently, and they're mostly rubbish. But yeah, they just haven't really piqued my interest, honestly. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of
we kind of learned
I'm
that.
kind of in the mindset sometimes. I just don't want to watch sequels because they just ruin the original for me. I've
that's
done that with a few things.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think we know at this point in time that horror movie sequels just generally not that great. So if you're going to watch horror movies, maybe just watch the first one and then don't watch the sequels. But yeah, Oscar kind of summed it up pretty well there. But I just quickly wanted to talk about another filmmaking aspect in The Exorcist that I really, really enjoyed. And I think people kind of like know about it because of that iconic shot with the window shedding light on that guy walking into the house, obviously. But the use of light is really, really impressive. It's kind of like full light, full front, full key light, full lit, at least for the first hour, like the first half, which is like, again, subverts the norm of a horror movie. Like generally we don't really see that. So it was kind of cool to see like this is being lit like a drama. Like there's full light, people are outside in daylight, and even like conversations are full light. So I really appreciated how light everything was. You could kind of see what it was going on, and you could tell there was a big attention to the light and the detail with just about every scene because it is so pitch perfect and the lighting is so well done throughout the entire thing. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, Friedkin's is just, I think this is his masterpiece. It's such a great film, and he did seem like a bit of a psychopath on set. Like the way people talk about like some directors, like that sounded really bad. Like on the documentaries I watched, like he would bring a gun onto set and just randomly shoot it to get reactions from the cast. At the end, when Father Karras falls down the staircase and dies, and the other priest comes over, like that priest, that's an actual real life priest that they got to come into the film. So he wasn't like an actual actor. So he really struggled to give that like emotional scene of like his friend dying, and Friedkin's just kept making him do it over and over again. I think it took about 10 takes. He eventually just slapped him, and the guy was so scared about screwing it up again. And in the scene, you see his hand shaking, and it's like brilliant acting. But this guy's genuinely so terrified of what Friedkins is gonna do if he screws it up again that he's just so scared. But yeah, that's actually the shot that's in the film, so it worked.
This is that scene with the Exorcist scene where she says the most out of pocket insults. I'm pretty sure it's that scene, isn't it? That I'm thinking of. Am I thinking of the right one?
What scene?
Yeah, what's it?
Am I thinking of the right? She's the demon Regan. Well, the demon technically starts. Am I thinking of the wrong thing? Just starts yelling insults at the priest.
Yeah, she does that.
Not the yeah. And he the guy was so taken away by it that he forgot his lines completely. And the first time they were doing it, he was so shocked and so taken back by it. But yeah, I remember that scene for the first time, just left my jaw on the floor.
Yeah,
Not because of the dialogue, but everything surrounding it is brilliant.
Yeah, there's a lot of shock factor scenes, honestly. Not just like gross or gore shock factor, but like, oh my God, what is happening? Like shock factor, which I think contributes to a good horror movie.
Yeah, that was a
Do you think they'll ever make...
Sorry, go ahead.
You go, Ryan, you go.
So I was just gonna say it's a really crazy switch from like a little girl, like she would just instantly go into that character like as soon as the scene started, and I think it was a big shock to them like hearing those like just like words coming out of her mouth after seeing this nice little girl. Yeah, go ahead, what you were gonna say.
Do you guys think they'll ever make another great Exorcist film, or just a film about exorcism in general? Because
well, I mean, they have made exorcism films in the past. Like, isn't The Conjuring kind of?
Yeah.
Technically, yeah. I hadn't really thought about
But
it like that, but it is.
things like the Pope's Exorcist or Pray for the Devil last
Okay,
year, those are the ones that kind of like directly like The Exorcist. There's never been anything like it since in that genre, which is why it's just been sucked so dry. And they're just all so similar.
yeah.
Which is just getting, and people just keep on trying it and trying it. It's just getting worse and worse and more tiring as time goes on. But yeah, I guess The Conjuring and things like that are putting kind of putting real life spins on it, because obviously those are based on real life cases, which I think adds to the horror quite well. But they've got more things to them than just your standard rip-off exorcism film.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
time. And it's about like generating that atmosphere, right? Like if you're just coming in and you want to see the exorcism child face scare, it's like, I don't know, you're missing the point. Like there's way more going on than just that terrifying face jumping up on the screen when you least expect it. And I think, like I said before, that's kind of what the sequels miss. They don't really understand the heart of the film. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's also just something kind of about that special, about like 70s magic, like just coming from that era, like where they had to improvise all the time with everything they done practically. Like there's so much stuff that they just had to do that you wouldn't even think of now, like the camera moves, like when they're running up the stairs, that would just be done now. Like it was a really long take, when they come in through the door all the way up to Regan's room. Nowadays it's probably be like a camera attached to like an automated arm or something, but they had to create like a robo swing that the cinematographer would like sit on it, and there's a hole in the roof, and there was about like 20 guys up there moving him about the house, with him holding the camera. It's like you just wouldn't see anything like that nowadays. Like there's stuff that makes it special that like they would just do easily nowadays.
Like yeah, like from a filmmaking standpoint, I watched The Descent last night, and like from an editing standpoint, like just a million cuts. There was probably 10 times the amount of cuts in The Descent compared to The Exorcist. And I feel like that's why I like The Exorcist, because there's not a lot of cuts. Like there's just a lot of drawn out, long, tense shots that kind of sweep through space and time. So I really appreciate that style of filmmaking, and I thought that's why it was effective. So Descent and Exorcist definitely on polar opposite sides of the spectrum and how they generate horror for sure. But I thought I'd just bring that up because it was funny.
I think it kind of varies on tone of film and type of horror film, I guess. But yeah, The Descent's a better film, by the way.
No.
I think this is a good time to segue into our top tens, unless you guys have some more thoughts on The Exorcist that you want to get off your chest.
I just wanted to talk about the practical effects a little bit. Another thing that makes them really special, like we don't really see that too much nowadays. Also the makeup is a standout. The transformation to Regan is just insanely good, and it took a lot of attempts to get that design. Like originally it was more of a monster design, but it just didn't look realistic or fit in with the tone of the film. Like we said, the rest of the film wasn't really a horror film, so it had to match up with that kind of being almost realistic. Of course it's an exorcism movie, but still. So instead her makeup is kind of made in a way so it looks like she's personally inflicted like the scars and everything on her face. Like it's mainly from Regan cutting herself with a cross that's one of the people in the house leaves in her room. So it's not just random makeup or scars or things on her face. It actually makes sense. Also towards the end of with the exorcism scene, when they're breathing and you can see like the air, you can see it's really cold in that room. They actually had to do that by just putting huge freezers in the room and just leaving them on overnight. So they would come in the morning and it'd be below freezing. They'd have to quickly just throw in everybody, do the scene, and it would end up being too warm, because they were all just in there acting. So they'd have to come out and wait until it warmed back or freeze back up again. So
Practical effects, man. Like you gotta love it, and that's another reason why, like The Exorcist and all these 70s, they have that level of authenticity, I guess. Like there is that level of realism that you get with practical that you just can't really quite get with CGI. But yeah, the practical is great.
Yeah, it's things like that that really just create like an atmosphere that helps performances as well. Like the cast is really just freezing to death as well, so it really helps them get into character and like being really in the moment of that. And even with like all the stunts and stuff with Regan, like when she lifts up in the air and everything, like that's really what they're seeing. So that really does help with their acting as well. And some of the stuff they done with Regan was brutal. Like we talked about the bed scene, like there's just a guy behind the wall throwing the bed up and down. There was a stunt guy with like just a contraption strapped to Linda Blair's chest, and he was really going for it with like just like trying to get that real reaction, like just throwing her about, like actually hurting her. And this philosophy was really shared like just throughout the whole film. Like later on when Ellen Bernstein, like there's a scene when Regan slaps her and she gets flung across the room. She was also attached just to a cord by a stunt guy, and they actually pulled her like, or yeah, Friedkin's told her to like pull as hard as he could. So she let in the actual film she gets flung across the room, and she actually hurt her back. It was that bad. So like her reaction of screaming is just generally her like screaming that she'd hurt her back. It's not like her acting. And yeah, just another scene that was just mental, I thought, was that final stunt at the end when Caris jumps out the window and rolls down the famous staircase. Like that was done for real. They had to just add padding to like the whole staircase, and then actually jump down it. I think they've done it a couple of times. They jumped down it, but yeah, just insane stunts that make the film really special. But yeah, do you want to get to our top 10 rankings if you don't have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think if you haven't checked out The Exorcist, definitely go check it out and stop after the first one. Maybe don't watch sequels.
Yeah, just don't bother.
Don't support the new one.
Yeah. But really just kind of look at it as maybe not a horror movie, as just kind of a drama essentially, and I don't know, try to put your perspective in Ellen Bernstein's perspective, I guess. I don't know. Cool film, great film. We all love The Exorcist. But now I think we're going to do our top 10 horror rankings. And now the thing about this is that horror as a genre is extremely subjective. So we have just decided to leave it up to our own interpretation. It'll be good faith. We'll pick some horror movies, or at least they have a horror in the letterbox genre description, I hope. And we'll just chuck in 10, maybe a couple honorable mentions, and just talk about why we love them so much and why they're good horror movies, and maybe some give you some recs. So I got my top 10 up here. Do you guys have your top 10 up here?
I do.
Okay, so did you want
Absolutely.
to go 10 10 10 9 9 9, or did you want to go 10 to 5 and then 5 to 1? How did you want to do it?
Just 10 10 10.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we start with Oscar, because he is such a horror junkie himself. I'm sure he's dying to get this off his chest.
Okay, so number 10, I have a film that Will does not likes to hate on. At number 10, I have I say modern horror masterpiece. It's not set in modern times, but at number 10, I do have The Witch. Absolutely brilliant film. The messages and themes this film conveys is endless. I think it's there's so many metaphors, so much to dive into here, so I won't spend too long. But the atmosphere is brilliant. The production design is insane. It's in Eggers' best for me. His insane directorial debut, and somehow he doesn't like it, which is insane to me.
It's a bad film. He just knows it's a bad film, so he's like, I don't like it.
It's an incredible film. It's got literally no jump scares in. In the first 10 minutes, it sets the scene perfectly. There's no kind of slow build up to shocking scenes. Well, there is kind of towards the end, but it kind of hits you with something straight away in the first 10 minutes. It's extremely shocking. It's got some of the best ASMR in any film I've ever seen. Black Phillip, that reveal scene is one of my favorite horror scenes ever. Amazing film. Go on to Ryan next, number 10.
Okay. It's not The Witch, thank God. Although it's a really good Eggers film as well, obviously. But I just changed my number 10 actually. Last night I rewatched the film. I don't know if there'll be controversy about if this is a horror film or not. But number 10 I've got Rosemary's Baby. It's from the 60s. It's not
definitely a horror film. Yeah, definitely a horror film.
Yeah, it's from the 60s. It's not exactly what you'd think of as horror nowadays. It's very kind of a psychological, kind of the atmosphere is kind of horrific. It's just a insanely well-made film in general as well. Like there's a constant sense of a dread and anticipation of just finding out what's really going on in the mystery of the film. Obviously just watched it last night, and there's so many great scenes, especially the dream sequence, which is really unique for the time as well. I can't really go into detail about the horror elements because it's enter spoiler territory, but yeah, it's a very unique type of horror with working into atmospheric, and you're kind of in that sense of mystery. You don't really know what's going on along with Rosemary, so I think it's really good in that sense. But yeah, rather than modern horror where you would just be a lot of tropes and more kind of try to be scary, with like jump scares and stuff like that. But yeah, Mia Farrow delivers one of the best performances I've seen from any horror film, I think, as well. But it's just a shame who directed it. Yeah, for number 10.
I was about to say that. I co-sign everything. Phenomenal. Just sucks that Polanski directed. Good pick at 10. I, again, kind of went back and forth. I've got so many different options that I could have picked at 10. Like 10 through 25 on my horror rankings are pretty negligible. But I went with kind of a psycho thrillery one. I went with Misery by Rob Reiner. I think it's terrifying, so I'd consider it a horror movie. I think even what's his name, Stephen King himself, after writing it, he said that would be his biggest horror if a crazed fan basically trapped him. Did we lose Ryan?
My camera's froze with the seconds.
Oh.
Sorry.
It is.
No problem. What?
What's happening with my camera?
It was like, we don't want to see you anymore.
Oh, it's not turned on in Discord. That's We're back.
There
Sorry,
we
go
go.
ahead.
Okay. So 10, I went with Misery. I think it's not quite a jump scare horror like you call it. It's probably more psycho thrillery, but I think it's terrifying. I think it does everything that a horror movie is meant to do. And I think even Stephen King himself said that this would be his horrific nightmare if a crazed fan abducted him like this. So I'm going Misery at 10. I think it's horror enough to get on my list, and I really, really do love the movie.
It's a great pick. I don't know why it's not a horror on Letterboxd, because it definitely is.
Is it not?
Yeah.
No,
It's not. I don't. Is it?
I swear
That's
It's got horror on Letterboxd. Horror drama
Does it?
thriller.
Oh, that's
I swear that it's no, because I think I watched it a couple of months ago and it didn't have a horror.
I watched it a few weeks ago. There's that one scene that just puts you in shock, and you just can't watch. It's so good, but yeah, one of the much better Stephen King adaptations by a mile.
There's a lot of bad of those.
Yeah, a lot of bad ones.
There's so many bad ones.
Oscar, your number.
Right,
Fine.
number 9. So number 9, I've gone for seems to be a pretty polarizing film, but I absolutely love it. It's another one of the most influential horror films of all time. I've gone for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. People think this film isn't scary. This film absolutely terrifies me to bits because obviously you can't get anything more scary than a true story. And I think this film just captures everything, the dread, the terror so well. It's got some fantastic jump scares in there. I would usually get really annoyed by constant screaming, but I think the constant screaming in this film just builds up so well, and it just leads to such a good climax. It's only 80 minutes long, but it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. And it gets disrespected way too much, ridiculous amounts. It's crazy.
I didn't realize people hated it. Like the online discourse with Texas Chainsaw Massacre is crazy, but I don't know.
Fantastic film for me.
Good pick.
Right,
yeah.
Ryan, you're number 9.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw is just a classic. But it's not my number 9. My number 9 is another classic. We just talked about it. It's The Exorcist. Yeah, it's just a film that I've grew to love. And researching how they've done everything has just pushed it even higher up into my ranking. It's quite a new entry into my top 10. But it's just insanely influential in the genre, with creating its own subgenre that, like we said, no other film has been able to come close to matching. And it's just one of the best directed movies I've ever seen. And I don't love all the Friedkin's movies, but this is definitely something special that he's created in his best film. But yeah, not got much to say because we've already said it all. But
Yeah, we've already talked at length. Yeah, but good pick. It literally just missed out on mine. It was just off the 10th spot. But I'm also gonna pick a classic. I feel like all of our lists are gonna include a lot of classic horror movies because those are the staples, right? But I'm gonna go another maybe controversial one. I'm gonna go Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Again, I think most people kind of see this as a thriller. To me, it's a horror movie.
It is a
There's
horror.
definitely there's some horror elements in here that really push it over the edge. But one of Hitchcock's best, not his best, but one of his best for sure. Just kind of a textbook horror movie. There's not many that can do it better than him in terms of creating an aesthetic and suspense. So Psycho is just one that I'm always thinking about. It's always in the back of my head, so it's got to be in my list. And I put it at number 9.
Mm. Can I just say that's definitely a horror? It's a horror franchise.
It is a horror.
It's
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's the first slasher
I
in
just
my
need the
mind. Like,
disclaimer. I need
yeah,
people
I'm not
come after
talking to you.
people are gonna come after me
Yeah.
for the ones that are about to come. So we'll see. But yeah, Psycho number 9.
So number 8 for me. Speaking of classics, a film I'm sure will absolutely be a modern classic in probably 20 years and already is starting to become one now. Jordan Peele's directorial debut, Get Out. Are probably for me the second greatest horror of this century so far. There's nothing is. Yeah, I don't know how people just label this as a thriller. There are some terrifying sequences in this for me. The originality is insane. I think the screenplay is absolutely fantastic. I think that's where it kind of holds up so well in kind of modern horror standards because a lot of films fail in their themes and just aim for scares. The themes are just conveyed so well, and it is really shocking. Actually, I would never see the twist in this film coming, but it's already aging so well, and it's just going to continue that way, and it will absolutely be a classic in the years to come. Ryan?
Yeah, I don't get how people would call Get Out a thriller and not a horror. It's definitely intended as a horror. Like people see Jordan Peele as a horror director, but then call Get Out and Nope both thrillers. It doesn't make sense. You can't be a horror guy if he's only got one horror film. But yeah.
And Us. I'm gonna say all 3 of them are horror. I think Jordan Peele
Oh,
has directed
absolutely.
Oh no, I'm
3
saying
horror
yeah,
movies.
but I don't want people to argue
Absolutely.
that it's not a horror.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah,
it's-
absolutely. Which is nonsense. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, number 8, of course, another classic we've got coming up. Wes Craven's Scream, his masterpiece of his career, I think. Just a hugely influential movie. Coming kind of towards the end of the 90s where the genre was in quite a rough spot with lots of shit sequels and kind of just slashers that he himself had kind of started with Nightmare on Elm Street, and obviously he didn't do any of the sequels, but he kind of started that like kind of stage of horror where it was just a bunch of slasher films. And once again he changed it with this like really fun film filled with lots of meta commentary that he'd experimented with throughout the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. With New Nightmare, I'm kind of talking about the meta of horror films, but he really sent it with Scream. And yeah, it just has one of the most iconic, best opening scenes in any film, and an iconic twist, with iconic performances. Matthew Lillard is probably one of my favourite performances in any horror film, just how crazy and out there it is. But yeah, number 8, I've got Scream.
Sensational pick. No spoilers. For my 8th, I've got another classic. I'm just like rhyming off classics, I guess. My 8th pick is Jaws. I think Jaws again falls into the horror category because it's terrifying. Not much to be said about Jaws. It's probably one of Spielberg's best, top 3 for sure. And it really does. That score kind of teaches you that horror is based on sound. And if you watch a horror movie without sound, you're doing it wrong because you could never feel the same way that a horror score can get you to feel. And I think John Williams does a tremendous job with Jaws. It's such a lurking and haunting score that nobody ever forgets about. It's maybe one of the best scores of all time. So yeah, Jaws. If you consider it a horror movie, it'd be a shame to keep it off your top 10 list. But for me, it is a horror movie, and it is on my top 10 list. So I got Jaws at number 8.
Great pick. Can't go wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, so kicking off number 7, I have a film that has been a bit disrespected recently from what I've been hearing, and a film that's only been mentioned so far today, and I have The Descent. Still the greatest horror film this century so far, and it's going to be tough to beat for me. I've seen this film like 6 times since I saw it first last year, and it gets better every single time. I think it's easily one of the scariest films I've ever seen. I think that's what just makes it so effective. The claustrophobia is incredible. The gore is points is so insane. But probably I think the best use of jump scares I've ever seen in a film by far. The lighting is incredible, set design, everything. I think the ending is absolutely fantastic. The UK ending, obviously, because the American one it's all right. The UK one adds to it though. The anxiety, the build-up is insane. Some people think it's too slow, and some people think it's too long to get going. But I think that's exactly why it's so damn good. So yeah, The Descent at number 7 for me. A weird comfort horror film. I don't know why. I just watched it a lot. Just get so much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, we watched it last night. You would not be happy with the watch party reactions. People were not liking it. It does start out a little bit slow, but like yeah, people were very disengaged early. But I don't know. It was a little.
The first 5 minutes are like, wow, it's wild.
A little too jumpy for me. A little too all over the place. Like the chaos and claustrophobia worked.
The chaos is so good once that chaos starts. It just hits.
Once it starts, then it's a tangent. It doesn't ever stop. But
that's so good though.
Really
I'm glad one of us has it in the top 10.
Yeah, definitely. It's a unique pick. I go number 7. Yep, 7.
Number 7, yeah.
I've got a film that put one of the best British directors on the map, Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead. Just hilarious movie that I grew up watching. It's kind of one of the first instances of watching a horror film. It came out in 2004, so I was probably 4 when it came out. Still a horror comedy, so at the time it was really scary. I mean, like, the zombies is zombie genre is one of my favorite subgenres in horror. So it was scary to me at the time, even though it's more of a comedy now to me. But yeah, Edgar's like fast-paced style just works so well. Worked so well throughout that whole trilogy, in fact, and it's not only one of my favorite horror films, but just one of the best films to come out of the UK in general. But yeah, it's number 7.
Yeah, good pick. That's one of those where I just don't consider it a horror movie. It's obviously a horror comedy. Yeah, but I don't know.
Horror comedy.
I left that off my list. Okay, number 7 for me. Again, another classic. I'm going with Alien. I feel like Alien, whatever you want to say, sci-fi thriller, it's nonsense because Ellen Ripley is a final girl. She is like one of the OG final girls. Not to mention Alien is a slasher. Like he hunts down his next victims and kills them. Anyway, Alien, sensational. It's tense. It embodies that sci-fi in a way that just elevates the horror. It's not like tacked on. Like some sci-fi horrors, I find like it's just like a shitty blend of genres. Alien's like a fusion of horror and sci-fi. Like you're out there in space, nobody can hear you scream. One of the most terrifying taglines ever. And Alien was just one of those that kind of lingers with you, and you watch it and you really feel that uneasiness, that sense of horror that I think any horror movie is really trying to evoke. So yeah, Alien obviously in my top 10 sits at the number 7 spot. Yeah, great movie, Alien.
I will definitely be getting onto that later. But for now, kicking off my number 6, I have a film that's already been mentioned. Spielberg's best film by a mile, his masterpiece, Jaws. Definitely. People who don't call this a horror film are crazy. That one boat jump scare of the night still haunts me. I have to skip by that scene every single time I watch it. I remember the first time I watched that as a kid. That scared the living daylights out of me, and it still scars me to this day. The music is obviously so iconic, fantastic. It just adds to it so well. That dolly zoom shot is never tires of seeing that shot. It's just so well made. Practical effects are incredible. It's such an enjoyable film. Not much to add to that because it's just a masterpiece from start to finish.
Yeah, let us know. We've done a Jurassic Park episode. Let us know if you guys want to see a Jaws episode. I'm sure, Spielberg, some of you might want to see it, but let us know. Done Jurassic Park, maybe we'll do Jaws. But yeah, great pick, Oscar. Great pick.
Definitely Spielberg's best film, I think.
I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't
It
have
is.
it.
This is
I
only.
think I got it
This
at
is
2 or
only
3.
five. This is only 5 out of 5 for me.
Really? I got Jurassic Park
Mhm.
and Catch Me If You Can above it.
I don't think I have any of these films at 5 out of 5,
Really,
actually.
catch me. Really,
Yeah.
I
Well, I
think
think
yeah.
Catch Me If You Can is just like super slept on his filmography.
I've like Schindler's List and Jurassic Park are 2 and 3 for me, but yours is number
Yeah,
one.
He's
same.
got so many good movies though. Like everyone's top 3 is going to be different.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, Spielberg goated, Jaws goated.
And number 6, I've got one that Will's already picked, Alien. Just another example of just that 70s magic, insane practical effects. Of course, you said probably one of the best. Final Girls. This is definitely Ridley Scott's best film for me. This is really elevates him as a director for me personally. By far his best film. One of the best. I don't know. One of the best horror franchises, I think, as well. I know Aliens isn't a horror film. At least I don't consider it. I consider it more of an action film. But every other entry I would consider a horror film. But yeah, just definitely one of the best of the 70s. My number 6.
Yeah, good pick. I think that might sneak into all of our lists. Alien's just such a great movie. We could also do an episode on Alien. Comment below if you want to see an Alien episode. Seth's films reviews. I know you're already commenting. But Alien, I'm gonna segue back to another one.
franchise.
Yeah,
The prequels
literally.
are great films. Alien prequels are
Yeah,
the
they're really
other
good.
2 best Alien films. They are better than Aliens. I stand by that. Prometheus and Covenant is better than Aliens.
Okay, that's a hot
Oh,
take. Then we'll
That's
clip
an
that.
illness
I
take.
I am really excited for Fede Alvarez's film next year. The Evil Dead remake was so good. I have faith in him.
It's not a horror
too.
film, but I'm not having the Alien sequels over James Cameron's masterpiece action film Aliens. I'm not having it.
It's like a
That's-
4-star at best.
Okay, I have it at 4 stars, but
There you go.
it's one of the best action films, though.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna hold my hands
that's
up.
the
haven't
reason I
seen Alien.
don't.
You haven't seen it?
That's the reason I don't like it, because it's an action film, and it just
Yeah, I would prefer if it was horror. but-
Alien needs
That's
to be a
what
horror
turns me on.
film.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm not a horror or an action movie guy at all. Like action movies do nothing for me, and like everyone tells me that Aliens is just like an action movie. So I've just been
It's
neglecting.
Cameron,
watching it
though,
all.
so you
Mm.
you know
Yeah,
you could.
I mean, he'll probably.
People who
cook.
think Alien is better than Alien, they're just
My
crazy,
dad,
man.
my dad thinks Aliens is better than Alien. It's a crazy
Crazy.
take.
That's crazy.
I know. Okay, but we'll maybe do an episode. Let us know, Alien franchise. We'll cover it all. But my 6th, we've already talked about it. Get Out. I think Oscar summed it up perfectly. It is a modern horror masterpiece. This thing's going to go down in history with some of the greats. Jordan Peele is one of the best horror working directors right now, and people got to stop sleeping on him because he's kind of done the thing where he's like, everyone loved him, then he got overrated, and now he's somehow like overhated. He's not. Nope was still fantastic. Get Out is a worldy of a movie and absolutely iconic. One of the best plot twists. He understands pacing and just everything about it. The scares, the moments, the dialogue, every beat. There isn't a dull moment in Get Out. It's one of those films that keeps you on the edge of your seat from beginning till end. And I'll never forget the first time I watched it with a couple of my buddies in theaters, just absolutely in shock with the twist and just how it unfolds. It's one of those that really kind of makes you come back and watch it again. Like, did I really watch that? But at this point, I'm pretty sure everyone's seen Get Out. Everyone knows how great it is. Jordan Peele's best movie, one of the best horror movies ever made, in my humble opinion. I got it at number 6.
Is it the best debut film for you?
Oh, it's up there. I'm trying to think. 12 Angry Men, definitely.
Shawshank, 12 Angry Men,
After
come to
Sun.
mind.
12 Angry Men.
After Sun. Yeah.
After Sun, yeah. I'm trying to think if I've got anything higher.
I do have a list of some directorial debuts. There's probably like 5 or 10 that I'd maybe put above it. I'd call it a top 10 directorial debut.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, really great film.
But moving on for me, entering number 5, and someone in this called this film mid, unfortunately, and not call it a horror film apparently. But number 5, I have Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, one of the best uses of atmosphere in any film. It's a slow burn serial killer horror. It has got some frightening imagery. It just builds up and builds up slowly and slowly. I think it's one of my favorite endings ever. It's just so subtle, and it ends quite abruptly for a lot of people. But this is just such a fantastic film for me. Like I said, I think Koshi Kurosawa as a director is just uses atmosphere so well among his horror films, which is even more evident in Pulse. This is absolutely become an all-time favorite of mine. Such an effective film. Japanese horror, just they do it differently, man, and it's so good. This is definitely my favorite Japanese horror film. So yeah, my number 5, Cure, and a film that a lot of people still need to see.
Yeah, I got to check it out, man. It's been on my watch list forever, but I know you love it, and I know Seth loves it. A lot of people really love it, so I definitely got to check it out.
I don't think Seth's seen it.
Oh, he hasn't seen it.
I think it's George.
George has seen it.
Yeah.
George has seen it. George likes it a lot.
It's a
Ryan,
bit
have you
like-
seen it?
Yeah, so if I have it.
Yeah, is it a 3-star?
Oh, no.
Disgraceful behavior.
I'll rewatch it this October. But yeah,
I'll
it didn't
give
seem
it
like
a
that
chance.
much of a horror film to me. I don't like not calling it a horror.
It is a
those
horror
films,
film. It is definitely a horror film.
I checked. It does say horror.
It does say horror, but yeah,
Definitely
okay.
a horror.
My number 5, one of the top classic slashers, Carpenter's Halloween. Carpenter's first film so far. I think we've gone our last.
Meh.
We're not
Ah.
having that.
Overrated, man. It is so overrated.
No,
There's
Halloween was
nothing
at
to
11
it.
for me. It actually pained me that I had to leave it off, but great pick. Carpenter is
There's-
going in.
Yeah, he is, but there's nothing to this film. Like it's like Scream has this Scream that kind of revitalized the slasher genre. It's kind of got this campy self-aware. Halloween's just Halloween.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's a slasher. It's just like a pure
It's-
slasher.
It's iconic. It's not. It's just iconic. The iconicness of that film carries it. It's not that good.
It's a very
It's
good
it's a
slasher.
it's a perfectly fine film.
Wow.
That's outrageous.
a little
The fact that
outrageous.
it's just Carpenter is just an outrageously well-made film. Like it is great Halloween vibes. A lot of the 70s slashers don't have like a good villain, which this definitely lands. Like Michael Myers is one of the most iconic horror villains of all time. Like I don't know what you're on about. Great kills, so many great moments, a great ending, and a franchise that I actually quite like. It gets very stinky.
It gets very
Stinky franchise, awful franchise.
They all have
and I've
like
only
good Halloween vibes though, I think.
Good October watch.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
pick. Yeah, no,
Mm.
I had it at 11, so it just missed.
Mm.
out.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
top
no,
5. Is this the 5th pick for me?
Mhm.
I feel like now we're gonna start to see some overlap. Number 5, I got Rosemary's Baby. Ryan already brought it up. He touched on it, but I think this is just an expertly made film. It's just unfortunate who made it. But it does everything right. Like it is a psychological horror film to a T. There's kind of that looming eeriness, and you don't really know what's going on. It kind of keeps you in the dark, which I generally don't like. I'm someone who definitely likes a little bit of exposition, and especially if it's like visual exposition, which you do get in some sense, but you're pretty left in the dark, quite frankly, which leads to a pretty enthralling third act, and it yanks you through all types of nonsense. But I'd recommend it if you haven't seen it. Go in blind. That's how I went in, and I absolutely enjoyed it. Some iconic performances, and again, it's just got that 70s aesthetic that we've all seemingly grown to love.
60s aesthetic.
60s aesthetic, yeah. But absolutely iconic. Rosemary's Baby is one of my favorite. Got it at number 5.
Great pick.
Such a great film, man.
Yeah, 68. Yeah, 68.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Right, so moving into top 4, and I have a film from my favorite director. A film that not many other people have seen, actually. I have Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Wait,
at
David
number
Lynch is your
4.
favourite director now? I thought it was
Yes,
Denis.
yeah, right. It's Lynch. It's definitely kind of changed as time's gone on. Denis like absolutely like 2 or 3. Like I could say like Kubrick, Villeneuve and Lynch, like my three favorite directors, and I kind of go back and forth, but I think Lynch is my solid number one. But yeah, this film is absolutely terrifying. I watched it for the first time beginning of September when I was doing my Twin Peaks run through, and there are some horrifying sequences in this film. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil anything at all because people obviously need to see the first two seasons. But yeah, it's a terrifying film, one of the most tragic character arcs in history. Laura Palmer, I think she's one of my favorite characters, actually. This film kind of pushes the boundaries of that. The last act of this film has just got some horrifying imagery, but it's so incredibly well shot. I think Lynchian horror is probably the scariest type of horror ever made, honestly. And the feeling you have watching it just makes you so uncomfortable because it's so unpredictable and so weird and so random. But it works perfectly in this film. And this film it got horrible reception, booed at Cannes. It has a whole different kind of vibe to it than the first two seasons of Twin Peaks. But it's absolutely one of my favorite horror films ever made, so deserving of my fourth place spot.
But Twin Peaks, the show, isn't a horror show, would you say? Or is it?
There's definitely it's a mystery show, but it definitely does develop into horror.
I mean, all Lynch
Absolutely.
has horror.
Yeah.
All Lynch has aspects of horror, but this definitely is a horror film for me.
Nice, good pick.
Yeah, Lynch is such a great director for horror. It's weird because he doesn't actually have any. Eraserhead is only really used like straight horror film, I think. In my opinion.
I was debating putting Lost Highway in, but I think that's more of a thriller mystery. That it's not listed as a horror on Letterboxd, so I just left it out.
The first half is a masterpiece horror film, but
the whole thing's a masterpiece.
yeah, the whole thing is a masterpiece, but I meant in horror.
But yeah, in horror, yeah, the first half absolutely. But yeah, Ryan, what is your number 4?
Yeah, my number 4 is also one from one of my favorite directors, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. This is the movie franchise trilogy that put him on the map. The first one obviously was just him going out with his friends into the woods with no budget. Just a bunch of, I think he was 20 at the time, and extremely young for a director, and went out and made one of the best horror films of the 80s. And then Evil Dead 2, he got his big budget after somehow making an extremely successful film from nothing, and then it's kind of a remake of Evil Dead 1. It kind of sums up everything that happens in Evil Dead in the first 10 minutes, and then continues from that, but it's campy, it's fun. Basically a horror comedy, but it's just so many great practical effects. Just pretty much set out all of Sam Raimi's directorial techniques with the Raimi cam. That was when he first showed off all of it. It's just such a well directed film, one of the best horror films I've ever made, I think. Extremely campy. Bruce Campbell's amazing. It's really on the edge of being camp, and maybe some people would say it was bad acting. I know a lot of people don't love Evil Dead 2 because of the camp side of it. It doesn't go right into that horror of the movie. Kind of a weird trilogy in horror. Like the first one is completely horror, the second one's kind of a horror comedy, and then the third one is pretty much goes straight into that comedy. But yeah, kind of a franchise that everybody loves or has a favourite from a different entry in it. It's a weird one, but a very consistent franchise. I think one of the best horror franchises.
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah, it's my number 4.
Never a bad film in that franchise, not at all.
Yep.
My number 4 is another modern classic from 2018. It's Ari Aster's Hereditary. I think if you told me this was your favorite movie, I wouldn't be shocked because it doesn't even need to be considered a horror movie, even though it is, because it's just so damn good. It does everything a movie should do in every aspect. And the performances, Toni Collette, I think her as an actor or an actress could be one of the best actresses to ever work, honestly. And it's crazy to say, but then you go through her filmography and some of the performances that she's turned in. This one extremely flew under the radar, got no critical recognition, but a very, very damn good performance. And honestly, one of my favorite performances of the year, maybe of all time, honestly. There's a really there's like this connection that you can build with the characters in Hereditary that is kind of absent with other horror movies for me. Maybe it's the fact that it's just so recent and feels so real. But the characters kind of feel like your friends, and this could be happening just down the street. So I think it works. It's got a good combination of shock factor and jump scare while maintaining that psychological, eerie, kind of blanketed horror that I also covet. But yeah, Hereditary is sensational. A modern classic, will go down as one of the greatest horror movies ever made in years' time. But one of my favorites. I know at least Ryan loves it. I don't know if Oscar loves it as much as I do, but definitely in the number four slot for me.
Yeah, I love it. Maybe showing up later on.
Foreshadowing?
Moving into top 3, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Right. My top 3 is like, I think it's pretty basic for horror, but they're classics, so you can't go wrong. At number 3, I have, again, a film from another one of my favorite directors, and I'm assuming will probably be brought up in everybody's top 3. I'd be very surprised if not, and that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. One of the best book adaptations of all time. I don't know what Stephen King's talking about, saying that he hates it. He's chatting absolute rubbish because it is incredible film. The atmosphere. I know Stephen King says that his film was warm and he hates how cold this film was. I think that works perfectly for this film. The build-up is brilliant. People say this film isn't scary. I do slightly disagree. That guy in the bear suit, man, every time I never watch that scene, it scares the hell out of me. I don't know why. But yeah, Jack Nicholson, incredible performances. Shelley Duvall, the most overhated performance in history, man. It is a great performance. Obviously, there's a lot of background with kind of what went on with her and what happened, but the film is incredible. It's incredibly iconic. Can't go wrong with it, really. So good.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece in horror. And over for you, I've got another masterpiece. I've got my second John Carpenter film of the ranking. I've got The Thing, a film that Alex does not think is a horror film, which is the most outrageous take I've heard.
I wish he was here to defend it. I wish he was here to defend it. I just want to
How
hear
is that not a horror film?
I don't know. One of the most iconic horror films of all time. Just how can you look at the practical effects and say that's not a horror? Is insane stuff that they managed to do.
bad.
Greatest poster of
Oh
all
my
time as
God,
well.
I forgot. He has it 3.5.
Yeah, bro. I don't know. The Thing is not it, bro. It is horrifically mid, but you know, go on. Yeah.
I'll wait for you to wake up and watch it again.
It was no mistake that it's getting left off my top 10. You know, it got left out of my top 25. I don't. That film doesn't belong near anyone's top 10 of anything, quite frankly. But it is a horror movie, so I will agree with Alex in that. But
you're crazy, man. The poster is the greatest poster ever made, man.
Okay, you say the first 10 minutes of
beautiful.
You say the first 10 minutes of Up carries it? The poster carries the Thing. That's the only thing good about the Thing.
Oh my God.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy.
Everyone's got to tell me how wrong I am in the comments. I want to hear all your slander, how good the Thing is, how bad it is. Let me know how right or wrong I am. But yeah,
how perfect it is.
I just don't see it as one of those A-list, A-tier horror movies like you guys.
A masterpiece film in general.
Damn.
It is.
Yeah.
So that was your third pick, Ryan?
Yes.
Third pick? So my third pick, I think we've already touched on this, but I'm going to go with Scream. I think as someone who kind of like doesn't really love the horror genre, I think Scream is like the perfect tongue-in-cheek, self-aware, yet also revolutionary good at what it's making fun of. So I just respect it on so many different levels for what it is and what it's achieved. It's definitely got a cult following, and I'm one of those fans. Like when I was introduced to this movie in like 2010, around 2018, around Halloween time, my friends and I would watch it every single year. We'd get together, drink some wine and watch some Scream, because it's just an iconic film. There's so many iconic scenes, and it's just a great way to get you in the spooky season. But yeah, Scream's one of those horror movies that I can definitely say I really do love. And it's almost a perfect movie. I almost call it a perfect film. So Scream sits at 3. It could be higher for me, honestly. It was pretty gut wrenching having to see Scream at 3, considering my connection with it over the years. But I got Scream at 3.
Yeah, just such a great film. Do you like any of the sequels as much?
Not really. Like, the sequels I think are definitely solid. Like, when you compare them to other horror sequels, they blow them out of the water. But like when you compare the sequel Screams to the original, they don't hold up nearly as well.
Yeah, I don't think anything is going to touch the original out of that franchise.
Absolutely.
But I think the sequels are way better compared to other horror franchises.
Yeah, definitely.
But moving into top 2, and oh dear, number 2, absolutely flawless film. Will is chatting absolute rubbish. I have The Thing, perfect film. I don't even know where to start, man. Just from looking at the poster, 10 out of 10 poster, best poster ever made. You have no idea what this film's about. It's the greatest achievement in practical effects history. This film is just unmatched from start to finish. The tension is brilliant. It's thrown in sense of mystery throughout, and it builds up and you never know where it's going. And I think that's what's so clever about the premise and the villain of The Thing, and just the title, because you don't know what it's going to turn into effectively or who it is. John Carpenter's masterpiece by a mile. I don't think it's even close. Halloween's bottom tier Carpenter, by the way.
Oh my god!
Stop that! Switch those two.
You're doing so well with just a massive L mixed in.
No, Halloween is bottom tier Carpenter for sure. Yeah, I just love rewatching this film. Just a pleasure to watch. Kurt Russell is so good in this role. It's so brilliant. Yeah, just such a cozy film as well. Stick on a nice winter's night with some hot chocolate. Perfect. My number 2 horror film of all time.
Awful pick. Terrible selection.
Rubbish.
One of the best remakes as well. Forgot to mention that.
Yeah, best remake of all time. I don't even think the 2011 prequel is that bad.
I haven't seen that. Maybe it'll be better, honestly.
The CGI is pretty bad, but I don't think it's a terrible film.
I mean, if they're already using CGI, they kind of already get away from the main
exactly.
Magic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It just looks weird, but yeah.
It connects really well to The Thing, though. The original is actually quite decent as well, from the 50s.
Yeah, I haven't seen the original from the 50s.
It's very different.
What's it called? The Thing from Outer Space, isn't it?
Another World.
The Thing from Another World, that's it.
Yeah, I got to check that out. I don't know. I got to give it a rewatch. I watched it around Halloween time 2 years ago, and I just have like no desire to revisit it. Thought it was relatively boring and not that amazing. But clearly, feel free to disagree. I guess we can scoot on to Ryan's number 2 before Oscar has an aneurysm listening to me talk about this.
My number 2, once again, is obviously already been brought up because it's a masterpiece in horror history. Stanley Kubrick's second best film, I think, The Shining. Just one of the most iconic horror films of all time. Jack Nicholson with one of the best performances in horror, maybe one of the best of his career in general, just one of the best actors of all time. So it really says so much that this is one of his best. Like Oscar said, Shelley Duvall, I don't get the hate she gets. She's very good in this. Kubrick is also gets quite a lot of hate for claims of what he done to her, but I think she's actually got a lot of good experiences from working with Kubrick, so I don't think a lot of that's true. Although Kubrick does have that reputation of being quite weird on set. But yeah, just a great atmosphere. Some of the most iconic imagery of all time in cinema. Just the carpets, everything about the hotel, the little girls. There's just so much iconic horror stuff. And yeah, just definitely my number 2 horror film of all time.
The
Good
quick
pick.
pans on the axe cutting every time, just
That is so good.
glorious. It's so good, man. So
Well-
good.
well, I'm gonna copy and paste that answer because my number 2 is The Shining. I
What
think.
did I say?
Epic.
It would be in everybody's top 3.
Yeah, I think if you're leaving this out of the top 3, I think you got to rewatch it. I think kind of what
Like
Ryan
you have to
says.
rewatch The Thing.
I guess so. I guess so. But it's one of those where it's just like, this is how you make a film, imagery, symbolism. This is how you tell a film, or this is how you tell a story through images. I think it's done in an extravagant and delightful way. I haven't actually read the book, so I know that Stephen King doesn't really like it. He says it's a bad adaptation, this, that, and the other, whatever. But as a film and a film alone, it stands alone as one of the greatest of all time. It never fails to amaze me, and I always am down to watch The Shining, no matter what time of the year it is. I'll always throw it on because it's not just the horror that gets you, like the performances, the set design. Like it's a full film. There's just about anything for everyone in it, and you can come away just thinking about life completely differently, honestly. And I will say it is Jack Nicholson's best performance, and I will say it is Stanley Kubrick's best movie. So that's how highly I regard The Shining, and I've got it up there in one of my favorite movies of all time, quite frankly. So really good film and a really good horror film as well. It's my number 2.
Got a
Very
very
excited
good-
to rewatch it in first time in cinema at the end of the month.
Yeah, dude, I
Oh,
gotta
yeah, I
see it.
forgot about
Very
that.
happy.
Oh yeah,
I've
Yeah,
never seen
very,
it in
very happy
theaters.
that they're doing that.
That'd be awesome.
It has a
This
very
sits
good
at my
horror
number 4
sequence.
Kubrick,
Does it?
which
It's your
just
number
goes
4
to-
Kubrick?
It just goes to show how great he is.
What do you
Just
have?
goes to show.
2001.
I have Eyes Wide Shut, Barry Lyndon,
Oh.
and 2001 above it.
Yeah, I gotta watch Eyes Wide
I
Shut.
just have 2001 above it.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's
Shining also a really good
2001.
horror sequel as well. That we didn't talk about. Doctor Sleep.
Doctor Sleep is underrated.
I haven't seen it.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
good. I think
that's-
it as I think as a sequel it works well, but it kind of works well in its own right, being kind of original. But obviously there are quite a lot of callbacks, but some great performances in that film.
Yeah, kind of that better adaptation of the book as well. I think kind of
Yeah.
both a sequel to the book and Kubrick's movie. I think it really worked well. And Mike Flanagan is one of the best horror
Yeah,
directors working in it as
great.
well. Like you saw it.
Right, moving on to the number 1 spot, and a film that has already been mentioned twice already. The greatest horror film of all time, Ridley Scott's Alien. Just unmatched, perfect combination of my 2 favorite genres. It's never been done better than this. The xenomorph is my favorite creature out of any film. He is so cool and so terrifying. The design is incredible. Everything about this film is perfect, from the set design, the performances, the pacing, the horror, the kind of couple jump scares work so well. I think I saw somewhere someone put, like, if you have epilepsy, watching the last act of this film must be the worst thing in existence. But the lighting is absolutely brilliant. I don't think it's even Ridley Scott's best film. I think I hold Blade Runner slightly higher than it. But yeah, it's masterpiece of a film, and a film that I get so much joy out of rewatching every single time. And the way it's held up over all those years is insane.
Oscar, do you have what's Ridley Scott's other one we were just talking about? Sorry.
Gladiator or Blade Runner?
Sorry. Do you have Blade Runner over 2049? Sorry, that was my question.
Yes, I do.
Wow.
Wow.
So you like
Yeah.
the OG one better? Interesting.
Both
feel like you-
both sit in my top 30, but
Oh, so
the
you
OG
really
Blade-
like them both.
oh yeah, I adore Blade Runner to absolute bits. But the original Blade Runner sits just outside of my top 10. Alien sits like, they're both top 15. They're both in that
Gotcha.
10 to 15 bracket. They're both really close, but Blade Runner just edged it for me.
I have Blade Runner at
Pick.
3.5, so
What, man? OG Blade Runner. I've said
I got
this before, we
2049
had to-
higher.
We
Yeah,
have
so-
to do a double Blade Runner episode. I think
Yeah,
that'd be
okay.
so good. The OG Blade Runner disrespect is so bad.
I know
man. It's
people don't like that movie, bro.
ridiculous.
I give
People
it a
think
4.
that film has no plot. They are absolutely crazy. It's one of the greatest studies on humanity ever. It's such a good film.
I think it's good.
Yeah, I
Again,
need to
let us
rewatch
know
it.
if you want to see a Blade Runner episode. We'll do it. We'll do a
I
split
absolutely would
2049
love to
and
do
original.
one. Alex
That
can
would be
back
good.
me up. He has both of them at a 5.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay,
Alright,
my number one horror film of all time. I'm
I
kind
know
of
what it
upset
is.
that it's not been brought up in all of your rankings.
It's not even top 20 for me. I just think that out.
What?
It's a great film, amazing film. Don't get me wrong, but yeah,
I don't even know what he's gonna say.
I know what he's going to say.
Okay. I'm gonna copy Martin Scorsese. Ari Aster, like one of the greatest directors working now. Hereditary, his best film, my favorite horror film of all time. It's in my top 10 of all time. It's just one of the
Damn.
yeah. I love this movie. Just
Co-sign. Agree.
yeah, it's so good. S- the atmosphere is unmatched. Some of the greatest horror moments of all time. There's nothing quite more scary than some of the moments in this film. Like they will stay with you for weeks, completely haunt you. Like some of the scenarios that happen in this film, like I won't spoil them because they're some of the best like moments that are they're not twists, but like moments in films that just completely like will destroy you of any film I've ever seen. The performances, we're talking about Toni Collette. She's actually probably one of my favourite actresses of all time. She's so underrated. This is one of the best performances of all time. Yeah, Toni Collette's done so many great films. She needs to be talked about more. Alex Wolff is great in this as well. It's so good, so good. Ari Aster's one of the best horror, or yeah, just directors of all time, or not at all time, working right now. He's not quite there all time. He's got 3 great films, 2 great horror films. I wouldn't really call Boys Afraid a horror film, but such a good director. I love it so much.
So what do you think? If Ari Aster puts up like 2 or 3 more absolute bangers, would you call him an all-time great? Because his first 3 have been pretty damn good
They have
among.
been.
Midsummer is mid. Midsummer
It's
for a
not
reason.
Midsommar.
He's got polarized.
Bo's Afraid is better than Midsummer for sure.
No.
I don't agree,
That's
but
crazy.
it's a
For
hydrogen bomb versus a
sure.
hydrogen bomb. That's both great films.
Yeah, interesting. Ari Aster definitely a good director, one of the best working today in the horror genre for sure. Good pick. Okay, my first pick. Again, this is one that maybe isn't directly a horror, but one of my favorite films of all time, Black Swan. I think this is just a really good character study, and I think above all, like again, you might not count it horror because it is kind of a character study thriller, but there are some really good moments, like horror inducing moments, and I think just this grind, this obsession for perfection, done in this dark kind of sadist, aggressive, dimly lit tone, is just beautiful. I think it's perfect. The performance really hammers it home. You need some powerhouse actress or actor to carry such a dialogue-rich or facially acting-rich performance, which the Black Swan obviously is. It's really there's only really 2 characters in the entire thing, or 3 characters in the entire thing. So Portman definitely carries. But yeah, it's just one of those films where I couldn't believe what I saw after I watched it. And Aronofsky seems to have that impact in his filmmaking, but for me, it worked best in Black Swan, and I just see it as a staple film that anyone who loves being on edge or wants to learn about how to create suspense or incite some horror, I think everyone needs to watch Black Swan because it is just a masterpiece of a film, and it really just made my jaw drop this first time I watched it. So, not only a great horror film, not only a great psycho thriller, but just a great standalone film with great performances, great directing, and just about everything you need from a compelling film. But yeah, Black Swan is my favorite horror movie, and that rounds off my list.
Excellent pick. I really didn't expect that. I didn't think you'd count it as a horror film. I definitely
Yeah,
did.
I was on the fence. I was like, should I leave it off and just keep Shining at 1, Scream at 2? But I threw it in there because I love it so much. I consider it a horror.
he's kind of like Lynch, where a lot of his films have like horror elements, just blended
Yeah.
into all of them. But yeah,
Yeah, totally.
Aronofsky's so good. He's one of my favorite directors.
Mother, great film.
Another
Would
great
you
horror.
call
hate that
Mother
film.
or Requiem a horror movie?
Mother is-
Requiem.
Requiem isn't.
The thing is, Requiem is way more terrifying. That's what
Yeah, it is terrifying.
It's one of those films, but I don't think it's a horror. Actually, nah, that one scene with the fridge, man, that messes me up every time.
I
It's
think you could call all
awful.
three of them horror: Black Swan, Requiem, and Mother. Oh, he did the whale as well.
Mother's great.
Pi is like very
I
borderline
haven't
on it
seen
as
Pi.
well. That's
I
like a
haven't seen Pi
psychological
either.
thriller.
Yeah.
Whale has some of the most like intense, like stressful scenes I've ever seen though.
Bad, awful film. Awful.
That's
film.
harsh. That's harsh.
Speaking of Alien, actually, Ridley Scott. It was just like announced. Ridley Scott has seen the director's cut of the new Alien film, and he said it was absolutely fantastic.
Oh.
Ooh.
He
That is
said he was
exciting.
terrified.
Wait, what is this?
The new Alien film coming out next year.
Ridley Scott's already seen it.
Ridley
He gives
Scott
it
has
the
seen the
stamp of
director's
approval?
cut, and he said it. And I quote: "He said it was fucking great." That's what he
Alright.
said.
We'll see.
Wow.
We'll see.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up our horror lists. We kind of got varying levels of horror fans in this podcast. Obviously, Ryan and Oscar, big horror guys. Me, not so much, but it's cool to see different perspectives and how people, interpret these horror films differently. But let us know in the comments. We want to know what your favorite horror movies are. If we missed some that you think needed to be in the top 10, let us know. It's always great to check out new films, of course. But guys, did you have anything else to say?
Just horror's the greatest genre in film.
Horror is an
Second
overrated
greatest genre. Second greatest genre.
Wow.
No,
Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely check out all these films if you haven't seen them.
You hate horror and you hate westerns. How worse can you
Those
get?
are my two least favorite genres. Horror and Western.
How? Western is like the most entertaining genre
I know,
ever,
just-
man.
Not for me. But yeah, let us know. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks everyone. Peace.
Fair.